Well, welcome to Lesson 2 of our Start, Strive, and Thrive course that we're using to introduce our beta group to the materials that will be launched this fall, and we appreciate the feedback from Lesson 1. Had some good feedback on the mastermind on Thursday, and a couple of calls and emails and discussions and other material with others in between that. So we've added several more people who are joining us to take part of the course, so hopefully we'll have them catch up and get some additional insights from those that are joining us. If you remember last week, we introduced the concept of the Stratia 7 and why we wanted to teach this and how we were going to approach it. And that the goal of the Job Creation Institute was to illuminate, celebrate, and facilitate the job creator in the American free enterprise system, focused on the free enterprise warrior. And of course, the multiple forms of that, whether you were, and I wanted to stress, because this was the point of several of the conversations, that for several of you who are really just working from home and beginning the process and have never run a business before, there was some question about it being overwhelming, or does it relate to you? And I just encourage you to, as we talked with several of you, to follow through the material, and you'll see where the principles and most of the content does in fact apply to you, and we'll be working hard to show you. Plus, the material that comes out this fall is more tailored to your individual interest and desires and goals, and it'll be useful to you to have this background when you jump into that. And of course, one of the benefits of going through this early course is that you get all of that information forever that we provide to you, make it available at a greatly reduced investment by you. So we started last week with the Stratia 7, in introducing you to the concept of the mindset, framework, and content, with the Stratia 7 being the framework. Now, we also introduced the business model canvas as a part of the Stratia 7 strategic consideration, and I wanted to just start this lesson off by a brief recap from some of the questions that came up out of that discussion, and understanding the difference in strategy and planning. We're going to do a separate video on this. I've pulled in a couple of other materials, and that'll be emailed to you this week. But a strategy is something you can't control. One reason people don't like strategy, it doesn't have control. Even at large Fortune 500 companies, the issue of strategy leaves a lot of people befuddled. Now, planning is something you control. You say, okay, I'm going to spend this much money, I'm going to hire these people, I'm going to go into these cities, and you're going to spend. The problem, though, is you don't know how the market or your customers or your competitors are going to respond to your strategy. It's your best guess. It's your planning. And it's why it's important to go through that process. The business model canvas, as we noted, was the starting point for that, and a way to get good material to tie into your actual business plan and plan for business that you actually go to the marketplace with. But what I have here is a brief overview of mind mapping, since it's a part of what we're doing here. Now, what we're going to do in this course is break this into several individual lessons rather than the one that we used in the introductory. So what we're going to do now is play this short video explaining mind mapping, and then take a short break so you can make your notes, and then come back to the next part of the class. It's about mindset, framework, and content. We've found relatively few people are familiar with the concept of mind maps. Now, we're not here to get you excited about mind maps or teach you a new technology. However, the underlying importance of having a framework for the content that you gain the insights that you develop, the materials that you have to keep at hand as an entrepreneur requires you to have some form of filing system or reference system. And over the years, we've found that the mind map is an excellent way to do this. It's up to you whether you go that route or not. We present our materials so that you don't have to mess with that. But in our ongoing instruction, we're going to have separate deep dives into how to use a mind map and why it's important. I thought we'd take just a few moments here to show you why we value this as a management tool. You see here the what we call collapsed version of our Strategy 7 mind map. However, with one click, you can see that what this mind map is concealing or containing is literally hundreds of pieces of information over the categories that we've talked about, and we can filter this, we can change it at any time. I can go back and easily collapse, so that if you're thinking about finance or marketing or one of these areas that we talk about, and you wanted to remember, for example, let's say in finance you couldn't quite remember what a balance sheet was. Well, as we will instruct you, the accounting involves several key pieces, and the actual management process involves a profit and loss, cash flow, and we tie lessons to that in the academy. So again, it's an easy way. Maybe you have a better way of note-taking or filing that you like, but this is how our battle book is structured. This is how the academy is structured, and something that we have found very useful. And another thing that you will see in the enhanced version of this we're providing with the launch of the academy this fall is that in each of these cells there will be embedded links and further information, references, for example, to the book Long Tail, some of the videos we'll be making, and some of the other material, links to websites. So again, it's a handy dandy one place. Keep it going. Now, just as a side comment, the field of mind mapping is expanding rapidly, and there's a lot of new products in the cloud, and one reason we're looking at waiting until the fall to provide a lot of the material is we're probably moving to one of the industry leaders that's really made a lot of advances they've made a lot of it during the pandemic period, and we're looking at moving that content, number one, so it's even more usable to you as an entrepreneur. Number two, because it operates in the cloud and is easily accessible for collaboration with your advisors and team members. And number three, that you don't have to subscribe to mind map if you don't want to. It allows you to access the information that we put out there in a very straightforward way, just through the cloud without any added expense, but also allows you to really use it as a tool if that's what you choose to do. So when we talk about mind map and show you some of our illustrations, we just want to make it clear that we use this system as a way to keep all of our material organized and in a presentable form and easy to add to and update. And when we launch the full academy, for those that get involved with it, all the material will be presented in this format so that, again, it maximizes its value to you. When we talk about mindset, and that's realizing you need all this different material, then a framework that makes it easy, and then we hang the content on that framework. So that's just a brief introduction to why we refer to and use mind mapping. So again, as wrapping up the overview and the background, you remember the JCI matrix, that this material again covers basic principles as well as detailed information that's targeted to you as a founder, but also useful to your advisors and team members and to potential investors if you use them, even funding sources. But it's that complexity of matching the information that you need to your specific goals and objectives as you move forward. So the the whole focus on what we do, for those of you that are just joining us, is to celebrate this trillion-dollar journey that creates wealth. And we like to stress that this is not just about you. Yes, we want you to be successful, and our focus is on the idea of succeeding, not starting, but succeeding in business. But as our research has shown, and a lot of the material coming out from us this fall in our tsunami effect discussion, is that this process benefits the entire nation, in fact the entire world, everybody. So this isn't just about us telling you how to make money, it's how your efforts as an economic participant and a free enterprise warrior creates innovation, opportunity, and wealth that benefits everybody. So it's not just about me or not just about you, it's about everybody. So the last thing we always like to remember, and you'll see this repeated many, many, many times in all of our materials, is for you to understand that there is nothing and nobody that can promise or guarantee you success. Our whole focus here is risk mitigation, finding those things that will ensure failure if they're not dealt with, taking them out of the equation so that then as you're going forward and you encounter those challenges and those unknowns, you're in a better shape to deal with them, to increase the possibility and even the probability of success. So we call that the Z factor, and again, we constantly harken back on that for two reasons. One, you need to understand that going forward. Number two, when you run into the problems, don't be down on yourself, don't be discouraged. Every successful company that has ever gotten to the point of success has made the mistakes, gone through the problems, and overcome the challenges that are a part of this process. On a separate discussion, when we get into marketing, we're going to talk about the invisible hand and the role of market forces, so you can understand the impersonal nature and hopefully be less discouraged over it seeming that everybody's out to make you fail. Instead, it's quite the opposite. Everybody is under the same impact with the same forces. Now, wrapping up, we talked about strategic and understanding the role of the strategic process. Talked about that a moment ago. Today, we're jumping into the second of the Strategia 7, the corporate issue. And the immediate response we get from a lot of people is, geez, this is boring. Doesn't my accountant or my CPA, my lawyer, have to handle that? But it's really multidimensional, and the entire concept of what is your corporate structure is driven by some simple decisions that you make. But it also involves you to have a long-term consideration of those decisions, not just the short term, and most importantly, not just by default or by ignorance and not dealing with them because you didn't understand them or you didn't take the time to deal with them. Now, there is some extensive material that we'll be providing to you, but we're not going to get into the deep weeds today, but I'm going to try to have you understand the importance of dealing with this issue at a general level, and then our other materials and our mastermind, we can jump into that. The first question that you will be asked by any potential investor or backer or board member or advisor that we'll talk about in a moment: what is the legal structure of your business, your venture? And the second is, what talents and capabilities and skills do you bring to the picture, you and your management team? Now, we come back to constantly trying to figure out what are the elements that make an entrepreneur successful. And there's been untold research and work and done. Venture capitalists have literally, not figuratively, but literally spent tens of millions of dollars with research and advertisers. I had you watch the Grosses comment about how they try to build the best team. you may feel intimidated by this. In fact, when you see lists, and this is just one of dozens of lists, when you Google or you look, and we've pulled a few of them in, and we've got our own matrices that we've built. You see all of these things, and you say, geez, there's nobody in the world that can do those. And you're right. That's why we say it's a team effort. And that's why we came to the Stratia 7, and we came to the concept of organizing the information, because no one is gifted in all 7 functional areas of running a business. And certainly when you look at a list like this, it's discouraging. We want to encourage people to be free enterprise warriors, but enlightened warriors, prepared for the battles they're going to face. But by the same token, we don't want them to be overwhelmed. No soldier going into battle has to go back and build their weapons and line up their food and their ammunition and then design the maps and the support materials. They go out to execute their part of the role, and that's the same thing. But the key thing, what we feel, and this is our thought, is the key thing that we believe is essential is the ability to spin the plates. Now, some of you have heard me say this, and we'll come back to this. I love this. We have a longer version of this that will be on the website. But just imagine for a moment, you're this guy spinning the plates, and the first thing you're worrying about, well, what am I going to sell? And that's in your strategic side. And the second thing is, well, how am I going to sell it? Well, that's in your marketing. Well, all of a sudden, somebody tells you you need a DBA or a corporate entity, and that's another plate. All of a sudden, you're dealing with that. And then somebody says, well, wait a minute, you got to have an accountant. You got to set up your books. So you go and put your attention on setting up the books, and all of a sudden they say, well, if you're going to hire people, you need a policy manual, or you need to understand taxes. You need to put together a payroll system. So all of a sudden you're going to focus on that, and then you notice, well, one of the things you were dealing with earlier that you didn't complete, and your lawyer calls you back on the accounting system, on the corporate structure, and you've got to deal with that, and all of a sudden you're dealing with rent. And we just cut this short, but if you watch this guy, he's constantly bouncing between the plates. Now, there's 3 things we like to talk about in spinning the plates. Number 1, you can't, as you see here, keep from dropping some of the plates. Be kind to yourself. Understand that you're going to drop some of the plates. Secondly, we like to make the point that that you when you are spinning those plates, that you actually are gaining skills and understanding what is important. And the problem is, when everything's important, you got to find out, how do I balance that? How do I prioritize? And the third thing is, again, there's always more going on than you can handle. So when we look at all the traits and all the abilities and all the skills, yes, there are some specific characteristics, and we'll talk about those in more detail. But the journey's tough. It's the $1 trillion journey. And the key we look for when we're talking to individuals, when we want to encourage them, is their ability to overcome challenges. But we use the word failure here. A lot of people avoid that. They want to be all positive. They want to tell you, think positive, and the universe will all of a sudden snap to your beck and call. Regardless of your philosophy on that, the point is the ability to keep going, the ability to figure out a problem, not be discouraged, to work inside your head. That's why we start everything off with mindset. To have the idea that I'm going into a battle. The rewards are worth it, but the journey's a tough one. There's going to be ups and downs, and there's going to be struggles that I have to figure out, that I have to overcome. And while we talk about there's no Lone Rangers, there are many nights and early mornings where it's just you sitting there saying, okay, what's next and what's going. Lance, our character in the $1 Trillion Journey book, is our example of going through that process. But the other part of that is when you talk to venture capitalists today, many of them now focus on the idea that they want people who have failed. And when you look at PayPal and you look at the issues with Facebook in the early days of Google and going back to Henry Ford, I love the story a century ago when Henry Ford, the icon of the entrepreneur, he built the first Model T in his garage behind his house. It was a brick garage. And he had to tear down the doors and the entryway to get the car out to go test it. I mean, just one of the thousands of things that he overcame to end up building a successful company. So that all involves the process of working with people in most cases. And this is the next section. Take a short break, and come back and turn the video on, and let's start talking about the management issue beyond just yourself. So when we talk about advisors, remember the JCI matrix. We have the founder, we have your team, which is your internal team, your employees and your staff, and then your external advisors, and then we have investors. And oftentimes investors will serve an advisor, particularly in a venture capital or more serious angel investing type role, but maybe not. But the essence of having advisors is listening to them. Now, there's a real difficult thing that you'll learn as a founder, is that listening doesn't mean following everything everybody tells you. You can't. You'll get absolutely contradictory information. And part of what we call the R factor that I came over and talking about working with people. There are no Lone Rangers, but ultimately you make the decision, and that is coming back to looking for the kind of advisors that will give you an honest feedback. Your Uncle Jim is seldom going to be a great advisor as far as helping you correct problems. They may be encouraging, and that's not fair to some Uncle Jims that are very experienced businessmen, and we have one of those in our $1 Trillion Journey book. But I want to make 2 points about your advisors. You consider where they're coming from. Now, by definition, a CPA and a lawyer who has chosen not to be in business has a different view of risk than you will have. They're not entrepreneurs, they're not founders. Now, they may be entrepreneurial in growing their firms, but bottom line, they're not going to see the world the way you are, and they're going to give you more conservative information. Also understand, they know they may be held accountable for that information. Attorneys especially are sensitive about getting sued, so they may limit what they tell you to limit their exposure. So you have to understand where they're coming from. On the other hand, an investor who's wanting you to get a quick return, or where it's taking longer, he may be giving you advice driven by his own agenda. But the key is be in a position where you're going to have advice. Now, right at this point, I want to talk about 2 key sources of advice. That's a board of advisors, and the other is a board of directors. Very few of you will have a board of directors. A board of directors is a legal construct. They actually incur legal liabilities if they serve as a formal member of the board. If you're going to build your company to be acquired or to go public, you will have a board of directors, and that's a totally separate discussion we can have. But virtually everybody, even the solopreneur working out of their home, can put together a board of advisors. And you want a varied, that means a good mix on your board of advisors. You want people that can give you, I like this counsel from Proverbs. It always intrigues me when I reread this, that even thousands of years ago, it was important to focus on the issue of your advisors. Now, I wanted to go back to one slide here when I was talking about the difference. I wanted to focus here on your accountant, your CPA, your attorney, and your consultants. For example, we have a whole separate discussion on the banker. Let me just tell you point blank, if you're a small startup, you're not going to get the banker to give you money unless it's 100% secured by your own assets and your personal signature. On the other hand, you don't want to wait to develop a banking relationship until you need money. Even if you don't need to borrow money, take time to develop a relationship with each of these people. If you're not going to be dealing with the investors, you don't need to worry about the security side. But if you take as much as $1 from a third party, you are involved with securities. And that's, again, a discussion we get into. As it applies to you, take time to understand those different roles of your advisors and those people who are there to help you get to the next level. Now, take a moment and sit down and think about who you know in your life, that has general business experience, has been successful or has failed and come back and been successful, who is a marketing expert, who is an expert in the industry or the target market you're going into, who is maybe a human resources expert, maybe someone that's a retired lawyer or retired accountant. Think of those people who are in your network that you might be able to call them and say, hey, can I get with you once a month? Can I get you a lunch or dinner or time, a coffee with you to tell you what I'm trying to do and see if you could help me? I'm a free enterprise warrior and I need your help. And again, we'll go through that discussion with those people and with your potential CPA and your potential lawyer. But be thinking now about who can I turn to. Likewise, make a decision whether you think you know the right lawyer, the right attorney, the right CPA. And if you don't, take time to go through the checklist of how to pick the right advisor in each of those areas. And that will begin the process. Then with your management team, you put together the resources that are, you may be the management team. But then as you move forward, any of these advisors, anybody looking to invest, and oftentimes people looking to buy from you or to be major customers, they're going to want to know who's on your team. What are their qualifications? What are their experience? What are their capabilities? And that's an important part of establishing yourself as a serious founder. So take a few moments to do that, and we'll come back and talk about the next key issue. Your legal structure, again, is one of those things. This is important to everybody, and I'm going to make a few points to have you understand why, but a lot of people get too intimidated by this and they fail to deal with this simply because they think it doesn't apply to them or they get bad advice. And I'm intrigued that I hear people on some of the courses, some of what we've found on Google and with some of the summits or seminars we've gone to, some people saying you must be incorporated if you're going to be in business no matter what size you are, or there's no reason to be incorporated, or you absolutely should have a subchapter S instead of an LLC. And I guarantee you, if you're like the normal startup, even if you have a little bit of experience, those are confusing areas. Now, the good thing is there is a lot of information, and we provide a lot of that information. We're not lawyers and we're not CPAs. You need a lawyer. But basically, there's a wide range of legal business structures that you can operate under. As you see here, this list is not complete, but to start making it relate to who you are and where you are, there's basically three categories, and that's the sole proprietorship, the partnership, or the limited liability company / corporation. I'm lumping those two together, although they're separate. Now, we don't have time today, and it's not our goal here, and you would be bored with going into each of these and the differences, although we have material on that. and you will be getting a separate set of materials on that. And in the fall course, we go into detail if that's of importance to you. But let me spend a few minutes stressing a couple of things. The sole proprietorship is where many of you are right now. You basically are operating under your own name. That's okay, and you save a few dollars on preparing taxes. You prepare your taxes with what's called a Schedule C, and that works depending on what you're doing. However, it's very important to understand that the way the legal world sees you and your business are the same. So any claim or any problem with your business leaves you totally exposed. Now, again, we could spend a lot of time talking through this, but I think many of you are confused over this, and let me make 2 points under that. Number one, if you don't have any real assets, you don't own a home, or you're in a state that protects your home, or you don't have any significant money in the bank, your exposure is not that big. If you get sued, you have nothing to lose, and people probably aren't going to waste their time. But I worked with one young guy that he had a lawn service, and he worked with several people. He had several vehicles. This was up in Dallas, and he was operating as a sole proprietorship. Turned out he had some pretty significant assets that had been left to him by his father, and I asked him if one of the lawnmower blades fell off and killed somebody, was he prepared to give up everything he owned to settle that lawsuit? And he was stunned by that. On the other hand, if he was operating as a corporation or a limited liability company and had structured and complied with things correctly, his personal assets were protected. There's another side of this that's important. If you're going to get any kind of outside investment, and when we'll talk about financing, we'll talk about debt or equity, including substantial debt, you want to be looking at something other than a sole proprietorship. Although, as in a startup, you're probably going to have to sign a personal guarantee, if you have a separate business entity, over a fairly short period of time, you can actually build credit in that entity that you're not liable for. So there are a number of things to stress, but as I said, there were two things. I talked about your exposure, your risk, but the second thing I want to talk about is taxes. A business entity is one of the best tax shelters available to you as an individual. Again, we're not accountants or CPAs, but we're going to provide you material, and we have a couple of CPAs that will provide us with the videos that you'll be watching in the longer course. But I want to make the point to you that if you're in a startup mode, and maybe you have a spouse or significant other that's saying, when are you going to generate some revenue? One really important thing you can do is get smart about using the tax advantages of a startup. Many of you, I would be willing to bet, use a tax preparation service, or you just take the standard deduction, and that just doesn't do it. We can show you, and the CPAs we've worked with can show you, that you can save literally thousands of dollars in cash and or defer tens of thousands of dollars of taxes legally and comfortably each year. So that helps take off the burden of a startup, and that spouse or significant other can look at it different if they see that at least you're lowering their taxes until you're making a profit. Now, again, that's an entire discussion, but I want to stress one thing about taxes. Part of having the system of government we have and the nation we have is everybody has to pay taxes, and reasonable taxes are part of our responsibility. However, the Supreme Court itself has made a point that no one has a moral, ethical, or legal responsibility to pay one dime more in taxes than they're legally, by laws passed by Congress, required to pass. My parents and many others lived in fear of the IRS and the idea that I'm just going to pay what they tell me to pay so that I never have to worry about being audited. I did a calculation at one time, and my folks weren't high earners, but it cost them hundreds of thousands of dollars at their retirement to not have been tax smart. So this ties into the types of entities, because we'll get into that when we talk about finances and exit strategies. But for you in the startup phase, don't wait months or years to deal with this issue. But the whole issue of your structure is going to affect your taxes, the level of protection you have, the kind of team members you can attract, control that you have or don't have over your company, the future options you have, and most importantly, and very importantly, it's going to affect your exit strategy and how you get out of this business. One of the real tragedies that we encounter regularly, particularly while we were in the business of buying and selling companies, is many people had worked 20, 30, some cases 40 years building their company, and they had not planned for, they were just happy working. They made a decent income, in some cases very good income. The Millionaire Next Door is a great book to read there, but they had not planned for their exit. One of the most tragic is I ran into a guy who was now trying to sell his business. His kids weren't interested, but he had found out his exit strategy was a heart attack. He had a heart attack, and the doctor told him, you got to sell your business. You can't, you do not have the health to do what you've done. So again, it's a complex question, and it's got a lot of issues involved with the idea of you being a founder or running your business. Is this word cloud shows, and I've left it foggy because there's a lot of fog, and I imagine almost every one of your minds if you haven't gone through this process before. There's a great YouTube there. It's clickable. We'll send it to you, and there's literally hundreds of them out there you can watch. And again, we'll provide you with a summary sheet that you can check through. But take time to consider this issue. We can address it more in the mastermind, and particularly for this beta course, we're willing to discuss with you individually, not as a lawyer, not as an accountant, but to send you in the right direction. Because while it seems confusing and cloudy, it actually has got some very good benefits to you as a founder if you know how to use them, and it saves a lot of heartache in the future. And one final comment on this: a lot of people are hesitant to spend the $1,500, $2,000 involved in meeting and working with a lawyer. It can be much more, but thankfully in today's age, because of the competition they have from the internet, somewhere we can send you from LegalZoom, and LegalZoom is not the end-all answer; it's a part of the answer. Or the $500 to $1,500 you spend with a CPA. Let me say this about that: there's expenses and there's investments. If you get in trouble, that lawyer is going to be 10 times more expensive getting you out of trouble than they would have been setting things up to keep you out of trouble. Likewise, if you're working with the right CPA and accountant, they will save you more in taxes than they will cost you. That's just an axiomatic fact. I'm not a big fan of spending money with accountants. I'm just like anybody else. But I've learned the hard way that they can be a very important, very positive member of your team. So that comes back to understanding your legal structure, because then we come into the issue of equity and shares. Now, again, many of you at the Wall Street level don't understand shares. And many of you talk about, well, I'll have a partnership with somebody, or I'll give 10% or 20% of my company to somebody, or you'll be offered money. It says, I'll put money in for 25%. and you have no idea what that means. Don't feel bad. 99% of the people that consider starting a business don't know anything about that. They don't even know the terminology. That's one reason we focus on words and terminology as a key part of our training and understanding. Now, basically, when you form an entity or you have a business, it theoretically has a value and or it has capital put in it. Now, that capital may be from your credit cards, but if you have a corporate entity or an LLC, you're going to have partnership interest or you're going to have shares, and that differs, but that's not important. You're going to have a pie of ownership that gets divided up. And entrepreneurs are always concerned about their control, and rightfully so, but they're also concerned about their valuation. And that's an easy thing once you understand how they're related, but it's difficult if you don't understand that process. So what we've done is put together in the $1 Trillion Journey, and one of the reasons we wrote the $1 Trillion Journey, we've developed what we call the $1 Trillion Journey app. It's a modification of the the equity map that we've used over the years in proposing the growth. And fundamentally, what happens if you bring investors into your company or partners into your company, and by the way, I'm throwing the word partner out there. Let me just say the best way to have a successful partnership is to never have partners. We'll discuss that more on the mastermind if that confuses anybody. But and there's nothing more dangerous than a quote 50-50 partnership, other than marriage. But when it comes to running your business, you don't want a 50-50 partner, and we can spend a lot of time talking about that. There are partnerships that have succeeded, but they are extremely, extremely rare. So back to the issue with the $1 Trillion Journey app. What we've done is put together in our story of going with Lance, Paige, and Zeke, the three protagonists of the first book that you'll be getting a copy of, is to go through their 36 episodes. So we have built the 36 chapters and cover what happens in each chapter as part of the app. And what I'll do here is I have a short recording of the spreadsheet/app that you'll be entitled to as a part of that process, that you might just take a break, take some notes, get a cup of coffee, and then come back and watch this video. For those of you who are committed Elm Street economic free enterprise warriors and have a very limited patience for getting into the weeds, you may not want to spend time on this video, but for the rest of you, we're really pleased and excited to show you the product you'll be receiving this fall when we release the full $1 Trillion Journey app. We've written the Main Street to Wall Street series to cover the three different scenarios of the Elm Street entrepreneur, the Main Street entrepreneur, the Wall Street entrepreneur, as we've explained elsewhere, and to deal with the different scenarios that they encounter. However, we've also built this app that focuses on the key elements of how you value your company, and if you work with investors, and if you're wanting to build a company that potentially go public, show you some of the details and some of the decisions that you go through. We're really excited about this product, and it's the culmination of decades of work in pulling this material together and using a number of experts in this field. However, like I say, it's a little bit more complex than some of you may think you want to go through. However, it deals with issues that are very important to every entrepreneur. And like we say, whether you're a solopreneur working out of your house, or you're really dreaming of the brass ring and going public, the principles involved, such as profit and cash flow and working with people, are the same. And this model is built. There are 36 chapters in the Elm Street book, and each one creates a different scenario for where the company is in its development, from just an idea to a full business. This is illustrating on the dashboard that in Chapter 14, the company has actually lost money, is continuing to lose money, which is to be expected, is consuming cash, but it's started to generate revenue and it has a new valuation. And that is driven by a detailed set of assumptions that I wanted to spend a few minutes going over with you, that deals with such things as the number of people you're dealing with in the press. As you can see in the early part of the company, that's not many, but it quickly grows. The number of shares that are issued, a big question a lot of people have: if I'm going to issue shares, how do I do that? Who do I give that to? This is what we call an equity map, and it shows how you can look at those shares being diluted over the growth of your company, and the marketing, the R factor, the number of contacts you're dealing with as you grow, your operational growth. Again, when we talk about spinning the wheels, these are all factors that start occupying the mind space of you as a founder as you're going forward. Of course, the key financial information, your sales, your receivables, your burn rate, how much money you're going through every month, the equity, what your earnings per share are, what your valuation is, and that economic reality that as you bring in more investors, your ownership goes lower, but if you're doing it right, the valuation and the total value of the shares remaining to you increase. So that's the ultimate goal. And then it goes through how you use your funds and so forth. So that is the $1 Trillion app. For any of you that are currently, and I've talked to one or two of you, looking at the bigger picture, we can work with you on that immediately and have you working on the spreadsheet. But for the rest of you, we're modifying the app so it's useful to all three areas. But it's an excellent way for you to grasp as you go through the book, and that'll be a part of the training journal for the $1 Trillion Journey that you also are getting as part of this course. So we wanted to introduce you to that. As I say, we're excited about that, and I think it'll be a very useful tool, and several of you at least will find it to be extremely useful new information. For those of you who... So we're back to the issue of now the last section in discussing corporate, and that's mundane company information. But next week we're going to get into marketing, and this is part of that transition into marketing. We're going to talk a lot about branding and the fact most people do not understand what branding is. I'll just say that most people think that you control your brand and that you determine what your brand is. Now, you control the things that you hope will create your brand, but in reality, the brand is not what is in your head, it's what's in the head of your consumer, your customer, your prospect, your employees, your community. How they see you based on the actions you take is what your brand really is. And we'll get into discussing that, but part of that is your company information. A lot of people ignore this and they get excited and they focus on their product, but your company is the representation of what you're trying to provide. So take care of the details. Whether you have a physical location or not, make sure your contact, your phone information, have a first-class website. There's things like Dunn's, S&P, LinkedIn, some other things we'll discuss that fit into that entire process. Now, what we've done so far today and over the last 2 weeks, We've mentioned mindset and framework and contact, and the bulk of today's course is on the framework and the content. But I want to come back to the mindset issue right now because I'm very sensitive to the fact that a lot of you, even in talking to a couple of you over the last couple of weeks, feel overwhelmed. And that's okay in one sense, as long as you don't let the overwhelming defeat you. But our mindset, again, is that the entrepreneurial process, the American free enterprise process, 80% of the jobs created in this country are from small businesses. And I've got statistics we'll get into later. But small business is extremely important, not just to you, but to everybody in our economy, everybody in our nation. So we need successful founders. We need people willing to pay the price. We need free enterprise warriors. So the challenge here is for you understanding the scope of what you're trying to accomplish, but then take the diligence and the time to improve the probability, the Z factor, that you can succeed in doing that. Now, I want to stress a couple of things. At JCI, we learned the hard way that we're trying to share what we learned through business. Almost all of our business activity was doing, and that involved a lot of success and a lot of tough failures. And that's where these principles and these concepts and these lessons come from. We did very little consulting. Now, some consultants are very good, and today, because of the internet and a lot of other things, you can find good consultants, but they have to be consultants that are focused on your success. We don't do a lot of consulting, and that's why we're providing a lot of this material. Some of you we can train to be good consultants. But in this beta class, because we're keeping it small and we're doing this on purpose, we can give you time that otherwise we couldn't afford to give you. Once this is out in the marketplace, we won't be selling our time. We'll be having other people can work with it. We've never really, we've turned down literally hundreds of offers to sell our time, but that's not the secret. And the few times we've done it, we've come back saying, we gave them good advice, but look at that, they're not going to be able to implement it or execute it, because small businesses don't have the money to do that. So what I want to get back to the mindset of this 8 weeks. Because you're giving us information, it's already been helpful to us. We're going to give you far more time than we can afford to give anybody else or any other situation. So take advantage of it. We're not just giving you something that we've packaged as an online course and to get through it and get out of the way. This 8 weeks, we're investing in you, and we're hoping you'll invest in us. Feel free to explore any questions this brings up, and we want to find where we could explain it better. We want to find what resources you could have, and we can personalize some of the advice that you'll never be able to get personalized in a standard online course. So the masterminds will be part of that. After the 3rd course, or maybe it's the 4th, we'll open up a Calendly, and we've promised several hours, but we're really not limiting it. Fortunately, we only have a small number of, quote, paid participants. We got some scholarships and some that are helping go through that we're wanting to help. But we'll give you the time. We will benefit from it. We're not just being nice guys or girls. But this is important to us, that this be useful to you. We know it's like drinking water from a fire hose instead of a faucet, but that's part of the process. And you learning how to filter that out, using the framework to put the content you need in a timely way and managing your time, is a part of the whole process. Just like once you're in battle, you got to pick the right targets and not be distracted and lose your time. So I appreciate you indulging me, reminding you why we're trying to do this, and hopefully why you're going through the course. So we'll look forward to the Thursday mastermind and your emails or your questions before, and then we'll follow up and go from there, and then work with you individually as you have your own questions. So have a great week. See you on Thursday, and watch for more emails. Oh, by the way, one of your bonuses this week is an early review of the Family, Friends, and Fools, and that's part of that mindset. I wanted to get that to you in a pre-release form because I was going to make these comments about what's inside the head of an entrepreneur, and while a lot of it's more personal, it lays the foundation for some of the framework and content we present to you. So again, enjoy.